Welcome back to Jack and Rex Tales. The wind had no mercy that night. It came down from the peaks like something alive, something angry, tearing through the Montana wilderness with a sound that didn't belong in any world a 7-year-old girl should know. It howled through the pine trees, it swallowed the road, it turned the sky into a wall of white so thick and so absolute that Jenna Miller could no longer tell where the ground ended and the darkness began. She had one arm wrapped around Emily, pressed tight against her side. The other arm held Ben, 5 years old, and trembling so hard she could feel it in her own bones. His face was buried in her neck. His small fingers clutched her collar with the kind of grip that only a frightened child knows. Desperate, trusting, and completely unaware of how fragile the person holding him truly was. The cave was shallow, maybe 15 feet deep, carved into the mountainside like an afterthought, just wide enough for the three of them to huddle together against the back wall. Outside, the blizzard raged without pause. The temperature had dropped to somewhere none of them wanted to think about. Jenna's breath came out in long, visible clouds. Her feet had stopped hurting an hour ago. She knew what that meant. She'd read enough to know that when the pain stops, something worse has begun. She had no phone signal. She had no fire. She had 2 dry sweaters left in her bag, and she had already given both of them to the children. Her own coat, the green one she'd bought at a thrift store in Billings 3 weeks ago, was wrapped around Ben like a sleeping bag. She sat in her thin flannel shirt and told herself she was fine. She was not fine. "Mama," Ben whispered without lifting his face, "are we going to be okay?" Jenna closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. 1 second to feel the full weight of that question. 1 second to let the fear move through her like a cold wave. Then she opened them again and pressed her lips to the top of his head. "We're okay, baby. Rex is keeping us warm." She said it before she could stop herself. The name came out without thinking. The name her children had given the wind. The name Emily had invented 2 days ago during a game in the back seat of the car, during a time when everything still seemed like an adventure. Emily looked up at her. Even in the dark, even with her lips pale and her eyes too wide, she was watching her mother with that careful attention that 7-year-olds sometimes have, that quiet, ancient kind of watching, as though they understand more than they're supposed to. "You're scared," Emily said. It wasn't a question. Jenna pulled her closer. "I'm cold. There's a difference." "Is there?" Jenna didn't answer. Instead, she began talking, the way she had been talking for hours now, filling the silence with stories because silence was where the fear lived. She told them about the brave queen who crossed the frozen mountains to find a home for her children. She told them about the forest that only opened for those who truly needed it. She told them about the knight who never gave up, not even when every road disappeared beneath the snow. She told them stories because she had nothing else left to give them. Somewhere around the 2nd hour, she stopped being able to feel her fingers. Somewhere around the 3rd, she started saying goodbye to things inside her head. Not out loud, never out loud. But quietly, privately, in the locked room behind her eyes where only she could go. She said goodbye to the teaching job waiting for her in Mayfield. She said goodbye to the little apartment she had imagined, the one with the yellow curtains and the window box for herbs. She said goodbye to the version of herself she had been slowly, painfully rebuilding over the past 8 months since the divorce. The version that had finally stopped flinching when a door slammed. The version that had finally started sleeping without nightmares. She said goodbye to all of it with a kind of quiet sorrow that felt too big for the small cave they were sitting in. And then Emily said, very softly, "Mama, look." He was standing at the entrance of the cave. A German shepherd, large, thick-coated, absolutely still. His fur was dusted with snow, but his posture was not the posture of a lost or frightened animal.
He stood the way soldiers stand, deliberate, alert, fully present. His dark eyes moved from Jenna to Emily to Ben with a calm intelligence that made the air in the cave feel different somehow. Warmer. Or perhaps that was only what Jenna needed to believe. Ben lifted his head from her neck. "Doggy," he breathed.
The dog took 3 careful steps forward and lowered his head, allowing Ben's small cold hand to touch his fur. He didn't flinch. He didn't pull away. He stood completely still and let the child hold a fistful of his coat, the way someone holds a rope when they're afraid of falling. Then he turned. He looked back at them once, just once, with those steady, dark eyes, and began walking back toward the entrance of the cave, back into the swirling white darkness of the storm. He stopped, looked back again. "He wants us to follow," Emily said. "Emily, we can't." "Mama!" Her daughter's voice was small, but certain. "He came here for us. He didn't come here by accident." Jenna looked at the storm beyond the cave entrance. She looked at her children, Ben's lips almost blue, Emily's hands shaking inside her sleeves. She looked at the dog, waiting patiently in the snow as though he had all the time in the world and absolutely no doubt about what came next. She had nothing left. No plan, no signal, no fire. Nothing but 2 frightened children and the fading warmth of her own body. She picked Ben up, pressed him against her chest, took Emily's hand, and walked into the blizzard. What followed was the longest 30 minutes of Jenna Miller's life. The dog moved steadily ahead of them, never so far that they lost sight of him, never so fast that they couldn't keep up. When Ben grew too heavy and Jenna's arms began to shake, the dog slowed. When Emily stumbled in a drift and cried out, the dog stopped completely and waited with the patience of something that understood suffering without needing it explained. Jenna's legs stopped working properly somewhere in the middle of it. They moved, but they didn't feel like hers anymore. Her vision had begun to narrow at the edges the way it does when the cold has been inside you too long. She focused on the dog, just the dog, the dark shape moving through the white. Keep walking. Just keep walking, one more step, and then the lights appeared. Through the curtain of snow, through the howling dark, 2 warm amber lights glowed on a ridge just ahead. They grew larger as she walked toward them, resolving slowly into windows. Wide windows, full of warm yellow light. And beneath them, a porch. And beside the porch, a thick-trunked pine tree draped in snow. And around everything, the impossible, beautiful solidity of a house that was real and large and lit from within. Jenna reached the porch steps. She made it to the top one, and then her legs gave out entirely. The door opened before she hit the wood. He must have been watching through the window. He was already there, already moving. A tall man in a gray thermal shirt, broad through the shoulders, with the kind of face that had been weathered by decades of outdoor cold and interior grief. He caught her before she fell. His hands were steady and strong and warm, and that warmth alone nearly made her lose consciousness entirely. "I've got you," he said. "I've got all of you. Come inside." He carried Ben. He guided Emily with one hand on her small shoulder. He somehow also kept Jenna upright through the door and into the heat of the house, where a fire was burning in a stone fireplace large enough for a child to stand in, and where the smell of wood smoke and pine and something warm on the stove hit Jenna like a physical thing, like a wall of safety she had almost stopped believing existed. The dog, their dog, the one who had found them, walked calmly past all of them and lay down on a worn rug beside the fire as though this were perfectly ordinary, as though he did this kind of thing every Tuesday. "His name is Rex," the man said, wrapping a blanket around Ben's shoulders. "And mine is Jack Thompson. You're safe now." Jack moved the way men move when they've spent decades in situations where calm efficiency is the difference between life and death. He didn't ask unnecessary questions. He didn't make them explain themselves.
He brought blankets and dry socks and a pot of chicken soup that had apparently been simmering since afternoon, as though some part of him had known, without knowing, that it would be needed. While Emily and Ben sat by the fire with their soup, slowly returning to color, Jack checked their fingers and toes with the practiced care of someone with field medical training. He spoke to them gently, in that low, unhurried voice, asking Ben about his favorite superhero and listening to Emily's detailed explanation of the brave queen story her mother had been telling in the cave, nodding seriously as though it were the most important information he had received all day. Later, when the children were asleep on the couch beneath two quilts, with Rex stretched protectively across their feet, Jenna sat across from Jack at the kitchen table and wrapped both hands around a mug of coffee and finally let herself cry. She didn't mean to. She had spent 8 months learning not to cry in front of people. 8 months learning that tears were something her ex-husband had used against her, proof of weakness, proof of instability, proof of all the things he said she was. She had built a wall against them so carefully and so deliberately that she had almost forgotten they were still there. But they were there. They came quietly at first, just a trembling in the jaw, a shine in the eyes. And then they came fully, without apology, the way tears do when they've been held back long enough. Jack didn't say anything. He didn't reach across the table. He didn't offer empty comfort. He simply sat there, steady and present, and let her cry, the way people used to know how to do before they forgot. When she finally looked up, she said, "I'm sorry. I don't usually." "Don't," he said quietly. "You kept 2 children alive in a blizzard on nothing but will and love. You don't apologize for anything tonight." The storm kept them there for 4 days. And in those 4 days, Jenna learned the shape of the grief that lived inside the mountain house. She noticed it first in the small things. The 2 photographs on the mantel, a woman with kind eyes and a little girl with her father's jawline. The child's drawing still pinned to the refrigerator, the crayon colors faded now, but the handwriting still sharp. "Daddy, I love you. Claire." The way Jack sometimes stood at the window in the evening, looking at the snow with an expression that had no name, but that Jenna recognized because she had felt its cousin. That particular stillness of someone living alongside loss so old it had become part of the furniture. She didn't ask, not directly, but on the 3rd night, when Emily had fallen asleep mid-sentence and Ben was snoring with his arm around Rex, Jack told her about Laura and Claire, about Victor Mercer, about the evidence that had disappeared, the witnesses who had vanished, the career that had been quietly ended, and the 15 years since that he had spent in this house on this mountain. Not hiding, exactly. Just no longer believing that the world below had anything left for him. "Rex kept me here," he said. "After the army, after everything. Rex was the reason I still got up in the morning. You need a reason to get up in the morning." Jenna looked at the dog, stretched across the rug, apparently asleep but with one ear slightly raised, always listening, always present. "He found us," she said. "In that storm. He found us and he brought us here." Jack looked at Rex for a long moment. He was a military working dog for 9 years, 2 deployments. He's found people in worse conditions than a Montana blizzard. He paused. "But he's never done it on his own before. He left the house without me. He just went." They both looked at Rex. Rex opened one eye, looked back at them, and closed it again. It was on the 4th day that Rex found the box. He had been outside with Ben, running in the freshly settled snow behind the house, when Ben came to the back door with snow on his knees and wide eyes. "Mr. Jack, Rex is digging!" The mail box was buried 3 feet down beside the old shed, weather-sealed, locked, but the lock was old and gave way with a flathead screwdriver. Inside was a journal. The handwriting belonged to Richard Kensington, a private investigator and Jack's oldest friend, missing for 5 years. The final entry was dated 3 weeks before his disappearance. "The rest is below, in the cellar. Rex will find it. He always finds what's hidden. If you're reading this, Jack, it means he found you something worth saving too. Rex found the cellar entrance beneath the snow that same afternoon. What was inside that concealed underground room, the files, the financial records, the photographs, the recordings, was everything Richard had spent 7 years gathering. Every transaction, every name, every order, the full truth about what Victor Mercer had done and who had helped him do it, including the truth about Laura and Claire. Jack sat on the cellar floor for a long time after reading it, not moving, not speaking. Jenna sat beside him without being asked. She didn't say anything either. She just stayed. After a while, he said, "He kept it. Richard kept it all. He kept it for you," Jenna said. Jack's jaw tightened. He nodded once, and then he did something she had not yet seen him do in 4 days. He pressed the back of his hand to his mouth and let himself feel it, all of it, the grief and the gratitude and the long, exhausting weight of 15 years of not knowing. And the tears came, quietly, the way they do for men who have held them a very long time. Jenna put her hand over his. She didn't say a word. The federal case that followed took 8 months. Victor Mercer was arrested on a Tuesday in March. The trial lasted 6 weeks. The verdict took the jury less than 4 hours. Multiple life sentences, federal prison, no possibility of parole. The names of Jack's wife and daughter were spoken in open court. The truth was made official, public, and permanent. Jack drove home from the courthouse alone. When he walked through the front door, Emily and Ben were at the kitchen table doing homework. The smell of something warm was coming from the oven. Rex was lying by the fire. The house felt entirely different than it had 15 years ago. Not because the grief was gone. It wasn't. It lived quietly now in the photographs on the mantel, in Claire's drawings still pinned to the refrigerator. But the silence was different. The silence had company now. It was a May evening, 5 months after the storm, when Rex trotted into the living room with something in his mouth. He dropped it at Jack's feet with the focused, satisfied expression of a dog who has completed a mission. It was a small velvet box. Jack stared at it. Then he looked at Rex. Rex looked back at him with complete composure. "I was keeping that in the drawer," Jack said. Rex appeared unconcerned. Emily looked up from her book. Ben dropped the toy he was holding. "What's that?" Ben asked. Jack picked up the box. He sat down on the floor, not on the couch, on the actual floor, so that he was at eye level with Emily and Ben. He held the box in both hands, and he looked at them both for a long, honest moment. "I need to ask you both something," he said. "And I need you to know that whatever you say, I'll understand, okay?" They nodded. "I love your mom, and I love you too. And I'd like, if it's all right with you, to be part of this family. Not to replace anyone, not to be something you didn't ask for, just to be here, to stay, to love you all like you're my own." Ben looked at Rex. Rex was sitting perfectly still, watching Ben with those steady, ancient eyes. "Rex trusts you," Ben said finally, "and Rex is never wrong." Emily had been very quiet. She looked at her mother in the kitchen doorway, Jenna, who had her hand over her mouth and tears moving silently down her face. Then she looked back at Jack. "You make her smile again. Like a real one, not the kind she used to do when she was pretending." She paused. "That's my vote." Jack opened the box. He stood and walked to Jenna, and when he asked her, there were no grand speeches, just his voice, rough and quiet and completely sure. "Stay. Both of you. All of you. Stay." She said yes before he finished the sentence. The following spring, the porch of the mountain house held 4 people and 1 German shepherd on a Sunday afternoon. The snow was gone from the ridge. The pine trees were green again. Emily was chasing a butterfly across the yard with her arms out like wings. Ben was sitting against Rex's side, reading aloud from a picture book, and Rex was listening, or at least performing a very convincing impression of listening. Jenna leaned into Jack's shoulder and watched her children in the mountain sunlight. Do you think he knew? That night in the storm? Do you think Rex knew what he was doing?
Jack looked at his dog, the dog who had walked battlefields with him, who had kept him company through 15 years of silence, who had left the house alone on the worst night of the year and walked into a blizzard and found a woman and 2 children in a cave and brought them home. I stopped trying to explain Rex a long time ago, he said. I just started being grateful. Jenna smiled. Rex opened one eye, surveyed his yard, his family, his mountain. Then he closed it again. Content, watchful, home. There is a kind of storm that feels like the end of everything. It takes the road out from under you. It leaves you cold and alone and without any map forward. And it would be very easy, in the middle of that storm, to believe that this is all there is, that the cold is permanent, that the dark is total. But sometimes, if you keep moving, if you refuse to stop, if you follow the small light ahead of you, even when you can't see where it leads, the storm delivers you somewhere you could never have found on your own. A warm fire, a steady hand, a home that was waiting for you before you even knew you were lost. Rex knew. He always knows. If this story moved something in you, if you believe that loyalty is still real, that kindness still matters, that broken people can build something beautiful together, then you belong here, with us, at Jack and Rex Tales. Subscribe, because we come back to remind you of the same truth that Rex has always known, that no one who truly needs saving is ever fully lost. Not while there's still someone willing to walk into the storm.